Welcome to Learn With Lowell. I'm Lowell, a serial entrepreneur, startup advisor, and your host for the show. Every week we discover and speak with experts, scientists, leaders, and artists. Today we are joined with Jessica Dornbusch, who is a filmmaker, writer, and producer. We get into her life, work, and particularly discuss one of her films, Reefa, which involves police brutality and injustice. Spoiler alert, during the shooting of the film, she also had issues with the cops, and we talk about that as well. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It tells the Google gods that this is stuff worth listening to. Let's stay curious, learn about Jessica, Reefa, and filmmaking on this episode of Learn With Lowell Show. You've spoken about the impact of your grandparents and their experience with the Holocaust and on your life and your world view. I'm curious, like, how does that impact your filmmaking, being a producer? I feel like Reefa in particular, it's like it kind of feels like some of the tones in that movie are similar, but I'm just curious, like, how do you see it actually playing out in terms of like how you do filmmaking?
Listen, I definitely relate to the immigrant experience, probably on another level than people that didn't grow up hearing about something like the Holocaust all day. You know, look, I'm sure my mom, who's the child of survivors, but definitely as the grandchild of survivors, it was a constant source of conversation. It was a constant topic, and how lucky we are, and how appreciative we are, and how I had to finish my ice cream and I had to finish my food and I couldn't leave anything on the table and those kind of things. So, with Reefa in particular, when they brought the project to me at first, I didn't really know much about his life. I knew a little bit, about his death and the case that was ensuing with the police, but it was only really, and I wasn't really that keen on taking on the project at the time. It was only when I met the family and I started to hear their immigrant experience and just how, they came to the US on an asylum visa, and they were doing everything right. They were really playing by the rules. They were constantly scared of doing anything wrong and making a mistake, awaiting their green card. So that was definitely the connective tissue for me. I just felt, it was a time where the news was really loud about immigrants and portraying immigrants in a certain way. And I thought it was important to show that in a lot of, it was really the irony of the story, coming here to save their kids' lives, only to be killed by, those sworn to protect and defend. I mean, really, really got to me, having been an immigrant myself or my family. And so yeah, I think that the Holocaust, plays a large part in my thoughts that way. I actually just had an incredible experience with my son. He was assigned a Holocaust book to read in 8th grade. So he read the book, and then they had to go on a website, and he goes to a secular school. They had to go on a website and listen to a survivor's testimony. So he said to me, he goes, "Are your grandparents on any of these websites?" And I said, "Well, I think my grandfather never talked about it because he lost his entire family. I think it was just too much for him to ever speak about." He eventually wrote a memoir, but he never spoke about it. But I said, "I think my grandmother is on." So we went on the one in Israel, on Yad Vashem, which is the Holocaust Museum in Israel. And she was there. She said it in Spanish. So I had to, because my grandparents eventually ended up in Uruguay. So I had to translate for him from Spanish to English. But it was an incredible process for me, since my grandmother passed away a couple of years ago, to hear it from her mouth. I had never really, I had always heard it in bits and pieces. I had never heard it, chronologically, the way that she spoke about it there. And it was really, really, really incredible. It was a beautiful experience to have with my son, where he actually, I think he felt it in his bones in a way that reading a stranger story just wouldn't, have had that same effect.
Yeah, it sounds really beautiful. To have that experience with him, and to also be someone that they know, it's like not like some, person number 3 or something, or like Sarah in accounting. Exactly. Like it's someone that they know.
It is.
Yeah. It almost felt like a story that'd be in a movie, like a kid just going about his life, and you like hear the stuff tangentially, and then he gets exposed to it.
Right.
Yeah.
But
life is a story.
It is for sure. And, I think another thing is, the idea of hunger for me really, really kind of affects me to my core. And I never really understood why it affects me so much, the thought of especially children being hungry. And I think it was probably that. I think it was, growing up in a household where it was so much about, you can't leave any food, you can't do this, that, my grandmother always saying how hungry they were for so many years, So anyway, there's definitely an emotional response to that, probably in a stronger way.
Yeah. And then the Reefa story is interesting as well, because in my opinion, that like I think they left Colombia because there's like tyranny going on. They come to America where there's not supposed to be that type of thing, and
Right.
then they face tyranny by
Yeah.
police officers. And it's
Yeah.
like I don't know how many people listen and feel about immigrants, but I love that people can come to America and become Americans.
Yeah.
And it feels like a betrayal of like what America stands for, that type of stuff can happen to people who are marginalized and stuff. Like people should be able to come here and have opportunity and stuff, not like that police officer who like I just kept writing when I was watching the film, like, what is his problem?
Right.
What
Right.
is his
Right.
problem?
Right.
Like, can you calm down? Like, it's just graffiti, like,
Yeah.
but too loud.
And ironically, he was an immigrant himself, but
Mm,
listen, at the end of the day, we're all immigrants here, and it's, that police officer in particular, I really found it fascinating only because at the time, with everything that was happening politically in this country, not at the time that he was killed, at the time that I was writing the film, I found it fascinating that so many of our friends, especially here in Miami, are immigrants themselves, first generation immigrants, and they were so opposed to more immigration. And I
mm.
just, I couldn't fathom that type of hypocrisy. I couldn't even like wrap my head around it, And I guess the way they explained it to me and the way that police officer felt, and it happens a lot in Miami, Cubans have been here for much longer than other Central Americans or South Americans that have been, moving in masses in the last couple of years, and they feel more deserved to be here, and it's just it's something that requires a whole separate conversation and a psychology to it that I can't really understand. I don't know how an immigrant has an issue with another immigrant, but I guess it is what it is.
Yeah, I think I was reading once that sometimes if like a work environment, it's like all men, and
Yeah.
then there's like one woman. Like sometimes the woman will get mistreated based on her
Uh-huh.
gender, but then if like it becomes the opposite way where it's all women and then a man, that they start
Uh-huh.
doing the same thing back to them, or no. And in addition, like sometimes when the woman gets promoted up, she'll be mean to
Yeah.
other women.
Right.
Like instead of being like, "Hey, let's lift the
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
let's make
Yeah,
it."
I'm sure that's true. I do.
That's weird. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it, it's like depends, just like in, any circumstance. But yeah, I've definitely had that experience multiple times, where some women in power are wonderful and all they want to do is help other women rise up, and there's others that, maybe because they feel like they had it really hard getting there and, you need to have it hard too or whatever. But yeah, definitely happens.
Sometimes I feel like when people talk to me, I ask like if someone's being mean to me or whatever, I think, who are they talking to right now? Because sometimes people are just yelling. That people are like reverberating something like a conversation that happened to them. Like someone was mean to them, so they're being
Yeah.
mean to someone else and being mean to someone else. So
Yeah.
when they like maybe like these women or these immigrants are being mean to other immigrants or women, because they're seeing in them the pain that they went through. And so
Right.
they're exhibiting on them versus being like, hey, I went through this, I should process this and not do it to other people. It's like they didn't have any like outlet for it or something.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think, isn't it the oldest story in the book, the high school bullies being bullied at home or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. As you travel America, does that immigrant sentiment change? Like, if you're like in Midland America or whatever, do people view immigrants differently?
I don't
Just in
know,
your experience?
I
Yeah.
don't really know. I look, all I can tell you is when I was in high school and I was a debater and I traveled all around the country. I mean, but again, this is a long time ago. There was no internet, there was, it was different type of information. Constantly people were like, wait, you're Latin and Jewish? Like, how does that even work? I mean, that was the biggest question I had all the time. Like, it was just, especially people in other parts of the country where either there wasn't a huge Latin population or there wasn't a large Jewish population, but the thought that one person could be both, and there's actually huge, I mean, there's huge numbers of Latin Jews, primarily because post Holocaust or even going back post Inquisition, they ended up kind of making their way into South America. But to answer your question, as far as the immigrant experience, I'm not sure. I always find it funny, I go to LA a lot, and in Miami, you get a lot of Central Americans, coming into Miami. In Los Angeles, you get more Mexicans coming into Los Angeles, just, from where the borders are. And every time I go to LA and I see a Mexican and I ask them a question in Spanish, I love watching like their heads do a double take, they're like blonde, blue eyed, speaking to me in Spanish. And it's always very funny, but it doesn't happen that much in Miami.
Yeah, that's interesting. In the movie, there's it kind of felt like there were times where I almost felt like a Hamilton musical was about to start. Like the rise up, like I need to like have my shot and stuff. Was that influencing you at all? Because I just felt like as the character was, talking, I was like, man, I just feel like he's about to start dancing, like Lafayette's about to come in. I don't know if that's like you were just like listening to Hamilton soundtrack in your free time or not, or to the extent that interests.
I have listened to the Hamilton soundtrack many, many times, but no, not consciously.
Yeah, there was like the first like 2/3 was just like I feel like there's a Hamilton musical here just waiting to come out,
really funny.
Which is like it's such a it's
that's actually coming in part 2. There's a musical version.
Oh, okay. There is a happy ending. The ending is not happy
in that one. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But did you feel like you were forced to be an ambassador for the two different groups that people saw you as representing?
You're saying with the film?
Oh, sorry. I jump around a little bit. My apologies. That was a poor transition. When you would go around and people would say you're Latin and you're Jewish, did you feel like you had to be an ambassador for both?
Funny enough, at the time, no. I think it's become, honestly, I'm both fronts, sadly, and I don't know if social media is to blame or just life is to blame or whatever. Sadly, those are topics that are much more controversial now, and there's a lot more anger. I don't know if it's because my generation was still kind of one step away from the Holocaust generation. So the, anti-Semitism was very quiet. I mean, it always existed, but it was much quieter when I was in high school. And same with being Latin, it's like people respected the immigrant experience. I don't know, but at the end of the day, I feel like there was a different level of discourse on all fronts back then. When I was watching the State of the Union the other day, and it doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter where anybody stands politically. I personally am really to the center of most things, and I was watching the heckling that was happening, and I was so disgusted by the entire experience because I'm sitting here thinking like, it doesn't matter. Like he's still your president. So anyway, that never used to happen. There was always a respect for the office of the president. There was a respect for the immigrant. There was a respect for the Jew. And I don't know, over the years, the anger, the vitriol, the nasty language has become much louder and much more commonplace. So maybe it always existed. It was just done in quiet rooms. Whereas now, the internet has given it a megaphone.
Yeah. I believe that the downfall of the American president respect, I think it started with Nixon. Mm-hmm. I think people like after Nixon did his stuff, like people stopped trusting presidents as much. And to some extent, I feel like the police officers, and I mean, I think they all should have body cams and stuff, but for like people's frustration with police officers, it's kind of like a symptomatic, it's like a symptom of a larger problem that people have a distrust with the government.
Right.
And how like they're just like one example of like a ton of authority. And the word means more, and like nothing they say can work for you in a court of law.
Right, which is sad because at the end of the day, as screwed up as we might be, and as screwed up as our government might be, when my husband's family is from Venezuela, and I lived there for a couple of years when we first got married, and my family personally is from Uruguay, and they go back there quite a bit. When you look at other governments, like true corrupt dictatorial governments, I mean, we have a really good system in place. I mean, it's not perfect. It's got a lot of issues, but for the most part, we can trust the system, for the most part. Yeah. So it is sad. I feel like sometimes people don't realize what the alternative is.
Yeah, that's why I like it if people could travel a little bit more, but then it's like a financial thing. Most people, right. I think most Americans can't afford like a $500 random cost.
Right.
Like that's how they're on the edge they are. Yeah. If they just went to other places, it's not that you can be like, oh, accept what you have, but like I think appreciating it more, appreciking the fact that the predominant number of police officers aren't bad people. Like even in your film, there was the other police officer who was kind of like, hey, I think you're going too far here, and he kept the other guy was clearly a supervisor, so he's like probably was being trained or something,
right?
And so he had like that power dynamic where it's hard, like he kept saying like, hey, you might want to stop this, so like which I really liked that in the film. I don't know to the extent like there was another police officer there in the story, but I did like that, like even in the story itself, like there's in the police officers, they wanted to counteract it. Like, hey, you're going too far.
Yeah. I mean, sadly, in the real story, that the good cop didn't exist. But I did think it was my responsibility to show that. I mean, listen, selfishly, sorry, I'm getting over a cold. Selfishly, I felt that from a creative standpoint, if I didn't show that, the other cop was a caricature. It was so over the top that it was not even going to seem real. Unfortunately, in real life, the guy was a caricature. I mean, a lot of the stuff that he said was taken from things that, were heard over the radio and real testimonies. So I had to find that balance, creatively. And I thought that it was my responsibility to show that there are more good cops than there are bad cops, and it's about finding a balance to the system and weeding out the bad ones, the ones that are corrupt with power. But listen, I mean, it keeps happening. It's all over the news right now. Yeah.
I wish there was I'm having someone from the FBI on, so maybe I can get some insight into like what they need, what do good cops need to like weed out the bad. Where like I feel like with unions and stuff from the outside, what I've read, it seems like if there's a bad apple, they're just forced to sit there and rot with it.
Right. Right.
Which that's horrible to anyone. There's an architectural thing where you get a painting and you're required to like start drawing out the rest of the painting as you think it would exist. And I kept wondering, like, I wanted to just like see that guy's home life, the police officer, just like go home and like, how does he treat his wife? What is he like with his kids? I started imagining, like, is he just a jerk wherever he goes? Can he ever turn it off? That's something
maybe not. Yeah. I mean, listen, I mean, think about the old adage of like mob bosses were wonderful fathers and community members and whatever, usually things are complex and layered. And, for him, it really, the guy's crazy and the real life guy is even crazier than the one that I showed, but this guy, he loved his city. I mean, he really, like, it really bothered him. I mean, he's nuts and he killed someone for it, but there are usually layers to the reasons that people are the way they are. Yeah.
It's interesting to the extent you can, like, to peel back layers and understand people more. That's one of the tragedies of police officers is that the police officers that I know, it's really hard for them to turn it off. Like there's the way you have to go about in public to be the shield that lets people feel like they're safe to go about their lives. Especially in Wisconsin, people keep like running people over and stuff and doing crazy stuff up here. But I'm sure that's happening everywhere else as well. Really? I'm just not familiar with it.
People over?
Yeah, there's a guy last year who I think he broke up with his wife or something like that, and there was like a parade going on. He just ran people over. I think he wanted a suicide by cop, but they weren't doing it.
Wow.
I think he was facing jail. He just kept irritating the judge, if I remember correctly. But I might be conflating two different ideas. But the police officers that I know, it's like when they're doing their job and when they're at home, it's really like you can see that it's really hard for them to go from like I need to speak in a certain way so people know like I'm the law, and when they go home, it's like. It's still there. Like it's really hard to like. You can talk with them, but it's like you talk in like a weird way with them sometimes. With the ones that I know,
I never really thought about that. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't turn it off. It's like if it's 100% at work, it's maybe like 70% at home. In terms of like they can bring it down by 30%. Yeah. But I've never seen someone who's a police officer be able to just sit there and enjoy their day.
You don't think they get home and the wife's the boss?
Well, some of the police officers I know are the women, and they're the same wherever they go.
Yeah. That's really
cool. My there's a person in my family who's a police officer, and I think she's like totaled like 4 or 5 different cars, and I mean at a certain point, well, it's like she'll be going to like help someone who's messed up from a car accident or something, and has the siren on, and then someone always thinks, I can pull out. That everyone's getting out of the way. That means I get to pull out. So they pull out and they flip her squad car.
No.
Yeah. Wow. People are very inconsiderate. They think, everyone's getting out of the way. That means I get to go. It's like, no, there's sirens behind you. Stop it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's really crazy. It's terrible for her. I think she has like tons of brain problems now because of it. Like she has trouble remembering things. But did you... In Miami, did you face any pushback from like the police officers? I think when you're shooting on location, one thing that you have is that there's I think you have to work out a deal where like someone comes and makes sure everything's okay, like from the police department. I'm not familiar with this process, so if no police
Yeah.
officers had to be there, you correct me. But I feel like there's some police presence that has to be there if you're like blocking off streets and stuff.
Yeah.
Did you face any pushback from them, or was it everyone? Was there any problems in that arena?
Yeah, no, there was major problems in that arena. I never wanted to shoot the film in the area where Reefa was killed. I because of that reason, I kind of wanted to stay away from that police department. I mean, it's notoriously a tough police department. So I thought we would go to a different county or even a different city or whatever. But one of our producers knew like a real estate developer who was redeveloping a lot of that area. And cinematically, there was so much texture to those rundown buildings that it was beautiful, but I was still a little weary. They met with the chief of police. The chief of police gave him a permit, guaranteed that we would be fine, yada, yada, whatever. So we start shooting. We were going to be shooting in that area for about a week. It was the only scene in the film that we were shooting sequentially. So we started off on Monday night, shooting the beginning part where he and the friends are kind of messing around. They start, graffitiing the wall. One starts going here, the other one starts going there. So we got through a lot of that. Tuesday night, we're shooting a lot of Israel painting the wall, things that start to happen. We shoot this scene with the cops, in the restaurant. Wednesday night, I get to set and they tell me that some of the gear had been stolen from the camera truck. So they were going to need to call the cops, to fill out the accident, the theft report or whatever. So I'm like, okay, I wasn't really paying attention and I'm working with the actors. And at one point I see like a police officer out of the corner of my eye as I'm working with the actors. And I don't know, there was something about it that seemed weird to me, but I can't really remember what that was at the time. Anyway, suddenly there's 2 more police officers and then 4 more police officers. And then they're yelling and I'm turning around, I'm with the actors and they're like, get the fuck out of Miami Beach, get out, close this set down, don't ever come back. So none of us really know what's happening. And the crazy thing is that night we had like 4 cameras and we had like cameras everywhere. Nobody got this on film. Because I think everyone was just like, nobody really understood what was happening. So we call lunch, you have, by union rules, you have to call lunch, I think it's 6 hours after you start production or something, or 4 hours. We call lunch early, which at this point now it's almost midnight or 1 a.m. And we just to regroup and try to understand what's happening. So they tell us that they called the cops in. The cops asked some production assistant what the film was. And, the production assistant, not using probably the best judgment in the world, told them what it was instead of just saying, oh, it's a film about an artist or whatever. And they freak out. They, call the rest of the police force. So our producer calls the police chief and the police chief is like, I'm sorry, I didn't know that that's what the film was about. And I wouldn't have issued the permit. And they're like, leave Miami Beach because the police are going to harass you. Like you got to leave. So this is getting into a little bit of film speak, but it gets really tricky, right? So you have a set about 100 people. It's not like tomorrow we could just go somewhere else and continue shooting this scene. A, we need to find continuity and try to figure out how to make these 2 scenes match. And B, it's a relatively big set. You can't just show up somewhere. I mean, these are permits that take weeks. So we spend the entire night awake. I mean, we're pretty devastated at this point. We don't know how we're going to do this. We're a tiny film, very small budget. Everything we've done, all these permits have been done way ahead of time so that we would be able to, do this. I mean, it was so tricky. So this is where the Miami film community really shined. We knew this one guy who has like a mini studio in Wynwood. And we called him and he basically said, I have a music video shooting here tomorrow. I just spoke to them. They're going to postpone it for a day so you guys could have the studio and just give you some time to regroup. So we took the entire crew there. I had to figure out at about 3 a.m. what scenes I could shoot at this studio that were never supposed to be at the studio and where in the studio we could shoot them. We show up at the studio the next morning, wake up the actors that now have to be in these scenes the next day that weren't going to shoot for another week. And the other problem was the actor that was playing the officer, we were losing him in 2 days to another production. Anyway, whatever. Fast forward, we get to the set. We still have no idea how we're going to finish the entire end of the movie at this point. And a couple of the biggest location scouts in Miami show up at the studio without us calling them. And they say, we heard what happened. It's bullshit. Like you had a permit. You should have been allowed to be there. We're going to help you for free. So they said, show us what you shot until now, and we're going to find a place in Miami that matches that. And they did.
Wow.
And they took their army of interns and went around Miami without us paying them $1, and literally went around until they found a location that somewhat matched the previous location. And we had about 4 hours to get 500 signatures, and they sent interns all over, like knocking on doors, and we got it. And so the next day we were at this new location. So I had to figure out how to make these two locations match a little bit, you know? So I thought, well, we were able to shoot up until the point where the cop grabs him and throws him against the wall. So if I cut to his feet and have the cop drag him for a bit, by the time he picks him back up, we don't really know exactly where we are. And that's it. And so we have his feet dragging, he picks him up. And by the time he picks him up, we're in Hollywood, which is about 25 miles from we shot the first part.
Wow.
But it was tough. It was not easy. I mean, and it was unfair. And honestly, for me, it speaks volumes about Miami and the Miami Beach Police Department, because, you know, there's a film that came out a couple years before us, Fruitville Station, and it was about, you know, a killing of a young Black man at the BART station in San Francisco. And when they went to shoot that film, the San Francisco Police Department said, you know, we messed up. It was on us. So come shoot the film. We're going to support you. And then Miami did the complete opposite.
Yeah, it's strange how people decide to double down. There was I think I was recently reading that like a little girl was being bullied at school, and she went to the administrators for help, and they didn't do anything, so she killed herself.
Yeah.
And then the administrators like doxed and like released private information of the lady saying it was her fault. Right. It's like, I don't know, like she's being bullied, and like she was being recorded being bullied, and she went to help, and then like the people, instead of saying, hey, it's our bad, they're like saying it's her fault. It's like, yeah, I don't know how many people being bullied is their fault for being bullied. That's a terrible
Well,
logic.
Finally, now that in that case, the superintendent finally resigned.
Good.
Because I think he or she was the one that said, tried to blame it on the girl, and got so much pushback that they had to resign, which is great. I mean, you know.
Yeah, it was weird I think they like the superintendent person like said the individuals' names, like normally they keep it private, and they just opened it all up, which is extremely inappropriate. Like grounds in and of itself of a fire, and even 100%. If like something bad didn't happen to the lady.
Exactly.
How can the police just revoke a permit and have no like nothing happen to them for it? Like I feel like if it's all done, you're making a film, like, you know, they should eat hay.
So basically they did have something to hang their hat on. I mean, something that is so small and irrelevant that it would never happen in a normal situation. But they did have something. So in the scene that we were shooting, the cop, the actor cop, was running after Reefa with a fake gun. Okay. I mean, real fake gun, you know? And so when you do that, you're supposed to have a police officer on set. Even though it's a fake arm, you're supposed to have a police officer. So it was during Memorial Weekend in Miami. Memorial Weekend, for anybody that knows Miami, is a crazy weekend. Multiple shootings happen all the time. It's a tough weekend in Miami Beach. And so all the off-duty cops that we called to try to get on our set, everybody was booked already. So we couldn't get an off-duty cop. So what our stunt coordinator said is, in a normal situation, had this happened, had the police shown up and somebody was using a fake arm, they would have shut down the set for the night. They could have said, you know, until you get an off-duty police officer, you can't shoot this, you know, which would have been completely legitimate and okay. So we would have gotten one, you know, hopefully somehow, probably paying more, you know, to come the next day. It was the fact that they were yelling at us not to come back, and we were told literally not to come back. That is the part that is extremely just illegal and unethical, and, you know, again, speaks volumes about who they are as a police department.
Yeah. Yeah, they sound like cowards if they don't, like, if they stand behind their actions, they should let you do whatever. That's one of the nice things about America. You can, like, you should be able to say bad things about your government, and the government just has to sit there and be like, you know what, maybe I have a point there. Or just, you know, say like nothing, because that's kind of their job to take it, which it's hard, you know, given depending where you're at, like if you're getting hit all the time, but it's also a part of the job to know how to speak to people and work with them. Right. Yeah. I wonder if you just didn't have the gun and it was just holstered the entire time, would they have just ignored it? Like if you just change that one detail?
Well, the fact is they got lucky that was happening at the same time that they found out what the film was about, because they were able to claim that as a reason, when the reality is it had nothing to do with why they were shutting us down.
Yeah. If you were to do a film like this moving forward, or a documentary like this moving forward, would you name it? Like, so in Star Wars, when it was really successful, I think by the third one, in the 80s or 70s, I think it's the 80s. And so George Lucas, when he would go to like get lumber or whatever, people would start charging him 2 to 3 times more, because it was like, oh, it's Star Wars, I can gouge these people. So he changed the name of the movie to like Blue Harvest, so that no one would know who it was, and they would leave him alone.
Yeah.
Would you do something like that if you were making a film like this? So like, even a production system, like, oh, this is Blue Harvest, we're just talking about nothing, so no one knows.
Yeah, I mean, it probably should have been a good idea. Yeah. But listen, for most of us, that were let's say like the higher level crew, I would think it was pretty obvious, but again, I can't blame a production assistant. They had no idea, and they don't know all the intricacies that went in, behind the scenes or whatever. But yes, probably a better idea to have named it, I don't know, whatever, the Smurf movie part 3.
Yeah. And at the same time, like a person in authority is asking a production assistant a question, so it's very hard for people to say no. That's why I think like most officers and lawyers are like, don't talk to, is as unfortunate as it is, it's like, don't talk to a police officer, which sucks, because they're people too. But at the same time, it's like, nothing you say is useful.
Right, 100%. I mean, the truth is, this was such a tiny movie. Even our production assistants were doing this for free. I mean, it's hard to criticize someone who was doing this out of the goodness of their heart. Everybody really just wanted to tell this story. People were working for a scale that they haven't worked for in 20 years,
Yeah. Well, I think if you were to do it again, definitely, Blue Harvest, or, Papa Smurf the Third or something.
I would never do it again, but I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think in one of your interviews that was about a year or so ago, you said that you're probably going to move to comedy, but I think it was facetious. So what do you see? Are you going to talk about more injustice like this moving forward? Or are you going to try and find, I don't know, maybe like a Shakespearean comedy or something?
It wasn't so much the topic that was hard. It was hard. It was hard that he had died so close to the time that I started writing the film, and that he was still very alive in his family's mind and in his friends' minds. And there was a lot of balancing that had to come with that, rightfully so. So it's okay to do, a hard topic, but you need to be able to have the creative freedom to tell the story in the way you need to tell it. It's hard enough to try to tell 18 years worth of a story into, 96 minutes. And to have the pressure of everybody kind of watching your every move and making sure that you're telling it in the right way, is double as hard, and having no budget is triple as hard. And it was the combination of all of those that nearly killed me. But I felt like a huge amount of responsibility to his family. And I'm so grateful for them for allowing me to tell the story. But at the same time, I going back now, I wish I had been stronger in, if you allow me to tell the story, I need to be able to tell the story in the way that I see fit, and you can't be involved, and as hard as that would have been, it probably would have made everything else a little bit easier, because ultimately we did end up having to come to that point. I invited the family to the first set, to the first day of production. I always wanted them involved. I always wanted them to know what we were doing. I guess I didn't realize how hard it was for them to see another actor portraying their son. I really wasn't maybe empathetic enough to that. And I thought, okay, I'm going to invite them to the scene with the lawyer. That was what we were shooting as the first scene. And it was relatively innocuous scene, but it's still not their son, it's still an actor portraying their son. And he's still not going to exactly talk like their son, or look like their son, or dress like their son. And there was a lot of emotions that came with that. And so eventually we had to tell them that, to please not come back to set and wait until the film came out. Ultimately, they were really happy with the film. I mean, really, really happy with the film. And they were so grateful that I had shown their son in that way, but it was a hard process to go through.
Yeah. I feel like it from their point of view, up until like the last, 20 minutes, it's kind of a gift. And so when people have died in my life, they like when you tell stories about them, it's like they're alive again. So like
Right.
for the 2/3 of the movie, it's just their son,
Right.
trying to
Right.
be the best they can. And so it's
Yeah.
like kind of a gift in that way that they
Yeah,
have
it
this.
is. It is. I think so, but at the end of the day, you're still reliving it,
Hmm.
and I think it's hard to find that space.
Yeah. Get out of here, spam. Thought I'd turn that off. I don't know about you. I get like robo spam all the time, which should not
Oh yeah,
exist. I think that should have laws against that.
100%.
So yeah, I think you were talking about this in one of your previous interviews, how it was really hard, just like the timing of it. And but I guess to the question, and maybe you're still living in the post of this
Yeah.
movie, because I think it's only a couple of years old. I don't know.
Yeah.
I suck at dates when it comes to things. So
Well,
I
there's
think I
also
feel
a
like it's
black hole of time called COVID that,
yeah. Yeah, it was like it's 5 years plus 2 for COVID.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if you need like a break. Like, how do you, when you have something this not grueling, but like with all these different things that are hard, the police are being hard, the family is
Yeah.
like showing so much emotion, and it's a part of it. How do you like reset the battery so you can do another thing like this? Because it sounds like
Yeah.
movies are a bit of a battle, because you have to like get the money, you have to get all
Yeah.
these things to come together, and then you have to get a bunch of people who maybe someone comes to work one day and they're like grumpy or something, and you have to so you
Right.
have to handle that. Yeah.
Yeah. It was, this is probably as challenging as a movie will get. I mean, it was a 6-year battle to get it made, where the financing came together and fell apart multiple times.
Yeah.
And, part of that challenge is, look, I could take it as a filmmaker because I'm working on other projects, and, you just know that this is the nature of the beast. Again, this is where it became very challenging to have a family awaiting this process, because every time that we were close and then it fell apart, it broke their hearts a little bit, almost like people didn't want to tell their son's story, and I had to go deliver that news. So it was a lot of emotions. We finally got to production. Other than the police thing, production was beautiful. And I know it was beautiful because something happened that doesn't happen very often, which is the entire cast is still close. Still till this day, like they'll all visit each other. They all come here to visit me. That doesn't usually happen. I mean, most films are like a circus. You kind of go from town to town and whatever, and everybody still has a special feeling from that movie. But anyway, once we wrapped production, within 2 weeks, I was doing post-production, which took a normal amount of time, about 8-9 months. And we wrapped, and we were supposed to have a huge premiere in Miami. I mean, huge. It was at this old theater in Miami that seats about 1,500 people. Theater was sold out. We had every press coming. We had all these distribution people coming. And it was, the release date the day of the premiere was March 12th. And March 11th, the Miami Film Festival has started. I'm at a party at the March 11th, and I'm getting 1,000 texts. So everybody's worried about this virus. Is this about to come? I'm worried. Can I go sit in a theater? And I'm sitting with the president of the university that sponsors the festival. And I say to him, I'm like, are you sure this is happening tomorrow? And he's like, oh, yeah, totally. Look around. Everyone's here. This is nothing. It's in China, whatever. And that's it. By midnight, I believe the news had come out that Tom Hanks got COVID. And that was it. Woody had COVID, and the world got shut down. And so by 11 o'clock in the morning, we were canceled and quarantine started. So to answer your question with a very long answer, it was almost like a self-imposed, actually not self-imposed, world-imposed pause. And it was such a gift for me. I mean, it really was such a gift. It was like a moment where there was no point in rushing, in working. There was no FOMO. There was no nothing. It was just me and my husband and the kids. And we spent the next 3 months, going on walks and cooking and trying to figure out what was going to happen to the world. But it was a beautiful time for me personally. Thank God everybody was healthy, around us, and our families were healthy. So it was a time where I really kind of got to recalibrate and just spend time with my kids and cook and be home. And, I really saw it for me as a gift at that moment. I feel bad saying that because there was so much suffering happening in the world, but that was just what was happening in my personal household. So that was a lot of healing. I mean, after that, I we were trying to figure out what to do with the movie. Nobody knew what to do with their movies. We weren't alone in that boat. I mean, everyone was trying to figure out, like, do you sell the movie? Do you hold the movie? And so we spent about a year holding on to the movie. That's what we were advised to do. And then a year later, companies were gobbling up a lot of content because people were still home. And so HBO approached us, and
Mm-hmm.
they came with a great offer. And so we sold the movie to them. Look, sadly, I would have loved to see it do what it was supposed to do and have its theatrical run and do, what it needed to do. But HBO has been wonderful, and they were really supportive of the movie. And we actually just sold it to Disney for Latin America. And so the movie keeps going, but,
Mm-hmm.
but anyway, to answer your question, it was COVID. It was all that time, and it took a little bit of healing. And then along that time, somewhere in COVID, I was introduced to a woman, and they said, it was a studio out of LA, and they said, come up with a film that we could get behind. And it was something in music, because the woman works in music. And we did. And that was such a different process. It was just full of joy and fun. And I love music so much. And so it was wonderful with her coming up with a film based in the music world. And so that's what I've been working on the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm. How does, just to deconstruct some of these, some of the things you said, how does HBO approach you? Do they just have like your email on file? Like, how do they know who you are and approach you?
Well, actually, funny enough, one of the HBO buyers was supposed to be at the premiere. I think she already did have my contact information from that, but no, we went through William Morris Endeavor. They were representing the film, and they sent it out to a bunch of buyers. Eventually a distribution company, Vertical Entertainment, bought the film. And so they were essentially almost like an aggregator, where they then sent it out to the different streamers.
Is it hard? Is it like complex to handle that side of the business? Like, you have the thing made, it needs to find a home, it needs to find an audience, but then you have like all these people that like come in and become aggregators, so then they sell it and do stuff like that. Is it like, I don't
process.
yeah. It sounds kind of frustrating, because then like the food is done, but then you have everyone else coming into the kitchen.
Yeah.
And they're kind of like critiquing you, and then they're, getting their own percentages and stuff like that. And it's like, well, I don't know. I made the cake. Why can't you guys
it's tricky. It's tricky. I mean, the hardest part is you have to deliver the film, and to deliver the film is an insane amount of work. It really is, especially for an independent film that doesn't have a huge team behind it. It's a lot of work, but no, it's not terrible. I mean, listen, you're at least in our case, we were so happy that people wanted it, and that they wanted to, really take it out on a major platform. And we were a tiny movie, so it was fine. That actually, it wasn't too bad.
Okay. And are you going to be like Quentin Tarantino, where you say you're only going to do like 10 films, or do you have any like structure to your life in terms of how you want your career to be?
I'll take any sentence that has me and Quentin Tarantino in the same sentence. Yeah, no, I have no idea. You know what? Up till now, I mean, look, I don't know how to say this in a politically correct way. Being a woman is not the easiest, in a lot of, probably in most careers, but definitely not in a career like this one. I had the choice many years ago, whether I kept traveling back and forth to LA and tried to promote myself and my career, as many directors get to do, or I spent time at home, and my husband has a pretty big career himself, and I had 2 kids to raise, and I decided I would focus on writing and do some short films just to keep playing with technology and keep it relevant, so to speak. But I did have to give up a lot as far as propelling my career in a fast forward motion to stay home and really be there for the kids, which I wanted to. I mean, nobody forced me to do that. I really wanted to. I felt that was my one shot to create 2 great humans, and they really are. They're 2 incredible humans. So now they're bigger, and I was able to get Reefa done, and now I have 3 projects coming up. And so we'll see. I would never shut down an opportunity, only because I do feel like I've spent the last 10 years on a little bit of pause, or at least taking it in slow motion so I could be home.
Is there So I've never been a mom at home with her kids, but I
Yeah.
imagine I mean that there's a huge population in the United States who does stuff like that. I feel like there might be stories there too that you can draw on for other things that you do moving forward. So, you know,
Yeah. It's called wine and melatonin.
really?
No, no, not at all. No, yeah, of course. I mean, listen, I know a ton of stay-at-home moms,
Mhm.
and a lot of them are women that I think that, especially my age group, I'm mid-40s. I think my age group is a really interesting generation where we were kind of born into that post-feminist generation, right? Where we a lot was expected of us, get as good of grades as boys, try to, get a career like a boy, like a man, and get into good colleges and do, and try to work, like a man and be competitive with men in the job environment. And yet a lot of us found ourselves in our 20s or 30s with, with a yearn to have babies and be home with them and raise them. And we felt it. And it's a nature thing, you just, you. And so I have a lot of friends who are these incredibly smart women who spent many years focused on their careers and then kind of U-turned and are now, focused on raising their kids. And it's very easy to kind of throw away the idea of a stay-at-home mom. Few
Mhm.
people realize, that these women could have had as successful career as their husbands do, or as many other men do. And it was a choice.
Yeah. I've heard, because I'm not of the population, but I've heard that when you make that choice, that some feminist people will give you static for making a family the priority.
Mhm.
Yeah, is that true?
Yeah, I listen, I'm sure there is. I never really stopped working,
Yeah.
I just had to alter it to be able to fit the lifestyle that I was leading at that moment, So I definitely I took some hits, career wise, where there was some years where I had peers that were, in LA going out every night, and it pays off. It really does. Anybody who says it doesn't is delusional. There is something when you're out there, you're gonna get more work than being, hundreds of miles away in doing carpool.
Yeah.
But it's okay. It was something I felt that I needed to do. So I never really encountered that with feminist friends, because probably I never stopped working. But there's definitely a looking down upon to women that choose to just stay home and focus on their families.
Yeah. It sucks that someone would think that people who are stay-at-home moms or make kids their priority are less than the other member of
Yes.
the husband or whomever. Um, like that's a really hard skill to have, and
Yeah.
it's been proven in like almost every study. Like I'm a science nerd. It's been proven in every study. Like men and women are like equally capable and like
Right.
can do great things. And it sucks that people put each other down in that way versus being like, hey, she's doing something really cool. Like that's neat.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, it kids really do require time.
Yeah.
And especially in this day and age where, before, like, when we were growing up, you would go out on your bicycle and go to a friend's house, and there was definitely an innocence to that. It's not so innocent when your kids can get into chat rooms or on video
Yeah.
games, and so I feel like a larger need to really kind of be present and be able to be there and talking to them and hearing what's actually going on,
Yeah. I've heard that in the like there's been a shrinking of I guess like the sandbox that kids can play in as
Yeah.
time has gone on. Like in the 50s and 60s, apparently like they could just roam like wild gazelles.
Right.
And nowadays it's like you need to like have someone kind of keeping an eye on as they go to school. And people
Yeah.
it's not community minded anymore. That's what I'm hearing. It's like your kids are your kids. But if
Right.
like they were walking by someone else's house and like someone tried stopping them or whatever, like the person whose house that's in front of would just go about their day potentially. Like there's not like a community sense of like, hey, there's a my fellow citizen, like let's at least call the cops or something or make sure they're okay. Most people like either they stick their nose in like a Karenish way. I know like a
Yeah.
Kevinish way is like the male version, or
Uh-huh.
they completely stay out of it and it's not like in the 50s and 60s. I think like people, like anyone would yell at your kids and then
Yeah.
they could roam and stuff. Yeah.
Well, I think that there's also a fear, of
Yeah.
being yelled at as the adult, of getting
Mhm.
involved with someone else's kids. I mean, listen, there's wonderful parents out there. There's crazy parents out there. There's parents that, just like you're saying, you might be wanting to do something to help their child, but they don't want you helping their child, And so I think people are very like, they're almost right to be like a little bit more reserved, because you never know what you're encountering. Now, having said that, if you see a kid in danger, anybody should be helping, obviously, but I do understand the feeling of not always getting involved.
Yeah. When I was in college, there was some, every now and again, there'd be like a woman who's walking alone at night.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know, like I told this story earlier, like during COVID, I shaved my head so I look scary. But even with my head not shaved, I don't know what it is. People walk around me like I'm a dog that's going to bite them. I'm not scary, but my wife notices it too.
That's really
It's
funny.
like, apparently I look scary, but when it's at night and people are alone, they'll go up to me like, hey, can you, like my house is like right there. Can you just like, could you walk me home? It's like, yeah, it's fine.
that's
Do you want to
nice.
like you want to tell your friends that you're being walked home by a strange man or something?
Right,
Just so like, you're
exactly.
yeah.
That's
So
funny.
like it doesn't take much. It's like I'm just stretching my legs. I feel like
Yeah.
if it takes like 20% extra and it's really not that big of a deal, like just help out other people. It's kind of
Right,
nice.
right.
It's kind of funny too to like out of nowhere, like there's sometimes they literally come out of the shower. It's like, hello, I'm like kind of lost. Can you help me find my home? It's like, yeah, it's fine. Where is it? Like, you know where you live and stuff. Yeah. Granted, I live in the Midwest, so maybe it's a little different than the coasts. Is it when you're 100 miles away and you're working on carpooling versus like networking, like what there's this great story with Jamie Foxx where like he would have like parties
Uh-huh.
and he'd have like a sound studio and he kept being like, oh, we should totally sing, because he wanted to get into the music industry. So
Okay.
he'd have parties that were great, and then he'd have people sing, and then he'd have a studio there, and he was just kind of like, hey, I'm here, guys.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
eventually
yeah.
like Kanye West got him in a song, and like, things went from there. But so being there, being able to network in that way, being 100 miles away, were there tricks or tips that you'd have for people going through a similar situation, to still be a part of it? Because you're still working, you're still finding a way to somewhat network and still
Yeah.
have opportunities come your way, but it's not the same. How would you advise people to balance that if they can't be, there like Jamie Foxx or like there
Yeah.
at the parties, but
Right.
they still want to have an active participation and progress their career?
Yeah, I mean, listen, well, first, writing obviously is a lot easier, in the sense that you could do it from anywhere. There's a ton of screenplay contests and submission contests, that you could stay active in those as a writer. And directing, look, I would argue that there's still a world in which, community made films exist and people want them. People still want films that tell a unique story and have a sense of place. So I wouldn't be scared of staying within the world that and telling those stories. The hardest part is the financing. I mean, at the end of the day, in South America or Europe or Israel, there's government grants to tell a lot of these stories, and the government grants pay for a large part of the production. Unfortunately, in the US, that doesn't exist. The art grants that exist are just not enough to piece together a film, maybe a short film, Some states have better tax incentives, so at least you could count on those. We in Florida don't. We used to have a great tax incentive. We lost it several years ago. But there is, if you can piece it together, whether it's like we did, some friends and family, some crowdfunding, some, community stuff, some cast members just throwing in, their work for free, crew members throwing in their work for free, you could still get it done.
How big are I've heard of this grant thing, but I don't know, like no one, am I Googling? I could not find numbers. Is it like a significant amount when you go to other countries like New Zealand and stuff, or South America, when they give you grants to like tell stories?
I have some friends in Mexico that are filmmakers and Argentina as well. And yeah, I mean, I think it's enough to finance the film. I mean, my friends in Argentina apply for grants all the time, and it's those grants that are paying for the movies. Perhaps larger productions, they have independent production companies that are also helping finance them. But I have friends that are telling major stories only through the government financing. Listen, the government should finance the arts. I mean, filmmaking is one of the arts, not completely financed, but there should be better grants out there for filmmakers.
Yeah. I wonder how they'd sift through all the applications. I think in ancient Rome, like the Romans, there was a couple of Roman emperors that would go around, and every time they would go to, they would literally build an amphitheater, build a they build out the arch, and they would go to the next town, build out the arch, go
Right.
to the next town, build out the arch, go to the next town. It's like a form of like a romanization. I forget the name, but it's like a
Yeah.
way of like bringing up the culture of the community while also being like, hey guys, we have some cool things to offer. And
Yeah.
so I see the benefit of having a more supported art system. Though in schools and public system in particular, I don't think the arts are given the respect they're due. They're cut before sports are cut, and I don't know.
100%. Yeah.
Like sport, no, I don't think art gives people concussions. So
Right.
I
Right.
feel like
Exactly.
of the two,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. I have a friend, actually, she's in the film Reefa, the woman Vivian, who's his friend, is a real life person. And the real Vivian is incredible. And she teaches art to several public schools, like especially, really low income public schools. And, there's nothing, there's no resources, there's absolutely nothing. Most of the programs have been cut, and she does it as like an after school activity or summer or whatever, just to keep these kids engaged in the arts. I mean, the research is really incredible about, what a gift that is, especially when you don't have any other resources, what a gift it is to those kids, and what an outlet it becomes for them.
Yeah, it's basically teaching you how to communicate.
Yeah.
Like art is a way of communicating things that are complex.
Right.
So, and like in high school, like the public system, they don't teach you how to communicate or get along with other people, or even balance your bank account, or understand like what credit card debt's going to do to you if you don't watch
Right.
it.
Exactly.
Like they'll tell you like, I don't know, like the history of like Ming China, but they won't tell you like these are the things you should do so that you don't get yourself in a bad position. And it could be like one course.
I mean,
Okay.
when I was in public school, I mean, they, I took home ec and accounting and whatever. But yeah, it's a rarity now.
Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people that they got into a ton of credit card debt because they didn't understand. I mean, 20%, like most credit cards are like 20%.
Yeah.
It's like, I hate that.
Yeah.
I hate credit card debt. It's like giving the bank free money. It's like, it's my money and you're just facilitating it. Like, get out of here and don't come back. Do you see yourself doing more of this independent type film as you move forward, or are you, as your kids are now leaving the nest, are you gonna like try to go to the more networking things and do bigger things? I think independence is big too. I'm curious about like your mindset in terms of how you move forward.
So I have 3 projects coming up. The one I told you about, the music project, it's called Redemption Song, and the script is done for that. We haven't gotten greenlit yet, but that will be backed by a studio. So that'll be bigger. So it'll be definitely an interesting experience to have. I'm excited for that. I haven't shot a film that has any kind of money. So it'll be nice to be able to, to know that the crew is properly fed, and we can scout the kind of talent that we want because we don't have those restrictions. That part will be really fun. I don't know what it'll be like for me to have a lot of different opinions creatively, because up till now it's really just been me and the voice in my head. I haven't had that many opinions other than people whose opinions I've asked, like my editor or colorist or people like that. So that'll be interesting. I have another film coming up that I'm on slated to direct, which is an independent film about a social worker, also based on a true story. It's based on a case out of New Jersey where this little boy died on the social worker's watch, and she went up against the state and eventually changed some of the laws in New Jersey. And finally, there's the last film I wrote, and that one I'm about to start shopping around. And I would say it's relatively independent in its spirit. Not to say that a studio or a streamer couldn't do it and do it for a little bit more budget, but it definitely has an independent feel to it. It would be nice, again, to do it with a little bit more money just so we could attract the kind of cast that we want. So I don't know, it's a strange world right now. It's a really, the other thing that's really funny with films and being a filmmaker right now is, there was always a sexiness to filmmaking, right? So you made this movie, and whether or not your cast was big or not big, or famous or not famous, or whatever it was, the film was done, and you got somewhat of a theatrical run, whether it was a small theatrical run or a larger, you could bank on a little bit of a theatrical run. And it was like this film, and it was going to come out, and it was going to be in the theater, and, people knew about it and whatever. And now I feel like the job has become a little bit more of like a commonplace job, in the sense that, like, you shoot something, you could spend all this energy on it, but then it goes up on one of the streamers. It goes up, like hundreds of other projects are going up these days. And ultimately you're just another little box on the streamer. Yeah. So I think if nothing else, it really amplifies the need for you to pick projects that you love, and you're doing it because you need the money and you want the money, which is valid. I mean, it's work at the end of the day, or because you have a lot of passion behind that particular story and you want to tell that story, because some of that sexiness is gone. And if you're doing it just for the applause or for the output, it might not be what you wanted. There's just too much content out there to have that kind of attention.
Is it within your control, or how would you have like a limited run in the theater? So it's like what you grew up seeing in a movie. So to some extent, like, if just being in the theater might be just one of those things that you look for, even if it is like a criterion for success to some extent. So is it something that you can control to make sure there is like a limited run in the theater, so that people see it, so you can go see it with your family and friends?
Yeah, I mean, with Reefa in particular, no, because there was still so when we sold it to our initial distribution company, we did have in the contract that they were going to release it on limited theaters. At the end of the day, it was our decision with the distribution company not to do that. It costs a lot of money for the production to be released in a movie theater. You need advertisements, you need prints, there's a lot that goes into it. And nobody was going back to theaters yet. It was timing. Now, would I make the same decision? Probably not. I would probably push to have it in some theaters, because it's cinematic. I mean, you shoot these films thinking about the 70-foot screen, and how they're going to look on that large screen. You don't really shoot them thinking about how they're going to look on someone's laptop. So, yeah, I would have loved to see it in a theater. To answer your question, it kind of just depends on the production. It depends on the cast. It depends on how famous the director is, the producer is, all those things, But listen, you see massive productions right now just going straight to streaming services without ever stopping at a theater. So I don't know. I still think there's nothing like the movie experience, in a theater.
Yeah, it can be good. It can be bad. In the Midwest, in my experience, has been generally good. Though I recently had Oren on. I don't know if you know him. And he was saying that he can't get good movie experiences because people are loud, or they, talk on their phone or something like that. It's like, oh, that sucks. Get rid of them. Yeah. But
when it's good, it's incredible.
Yeah. I was just thinking, like, what was your first movie experience? Was it in a theater, or was it in a drive-in movie theater? I like drive-in movie theaters. I'm not saying you're old enough to only be in drive-in movie theaters, but was it the type where you were encased in something, or was it the drive-in movie theater that was your first that you enjoyed so much?
I'm only 46, so not that old.
Yeah, I know. I was like, she's not old enough for this.
Yeah, no. Funny enough, I've actually never been to a drive-in movie theater ever.
Oh, it's fun.
Yeah, I've always wanted to go. I've never been. There was one in Miami that existed many years ago. I never ended up going to it. I've never been. No, my first movie going experiences were always in theaters. There's a couple of standouts, as there is to anybody else, but yeah, that's why I'm saying, like, when it's good, it's really incredible. Like those memories that you do have of your early movies that really, cut to your soul and made you just think about this as a lifestyle. That can only happen in I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's going to be kids 20 years from now that they're like, no, I was sitting at home and I saw these movies and I wanted to be a filmmaker. I don't know, but for me, seeing films as a kid, films like E.T. and eventually Dirty Dancing and Close Encounters and Star Wars, I mean, in a communal setting, with the energy, the palpable energy of everybody else kind of feeling the emotions that you were feeling, I don't think there's anything like that.
Yeah. I'd recommend checking out a drive-in. They're neat. They're I just think they're neat. Like, it's a fun thing to do. Valentine's Day is coming up. I don't know if there's any romance stuff, though. At the same time, I think you said there's none in Miami that do a drive-in. They were doing in Austin. They were doing a drive-in thing where they put a film up on the wall, and they had people like drive into like parking lots so they could see movies, because COVID was happening and stuff.
Yeah,
so that's kind of fun.
Actually, they did do that in Miami. We didn't end up going, but they did that, and it was pretty successful, I think.
Yeah. For for people, to what extent do you read as well as make movies and stuff? Are you a book reader?
Yeah, I love books.
Okay, sweet. That that makes my next question easier. What are some books that you recommend people check out? It can be about film. It could just be about things that you enjoy.
Oh shit. Okay. I keep trying to like figure out my technology today. It's just not my friend right now.
Mhm.
Nothing is working the way I want it to work. What are some books I recommend people? I mean, okay, hold on. I'm trying to remember what I've read. So recently I read two books by this female author that they recommended to me that were actually great. And I'm just looking on Amazon just because I'm trying to remember the exact title so I don't butcher the titles. But I just read that actually I think Blake Lively was cast in it. Let me see. I believe the author's name is Colleen Hoover. And it was called oh yeah, It Ends With Us and It Starts With Us. They were easy reads, really sweet books. I really liked them. I thought that they were fun. There was one called like the Wives of Evelyn Hugo, something like that, I believe, and that was really good too. Oh, Daisy Jones and the Six, coming out now on Amazon Prime. I saw that was a great book. That was a great book, very reminiscent of Almost Famous, which is a film I love. What else? I read a couple of Malcolm Gladwell books recently, which I really enjoyed. I had never read Outliers.
Mhm.
Oh, and then a completely different spectrum on a political spectrum. There's a book that I really love called Red Notice.
Mhm.
And it's a book by, his name is Bill Browder. He was a US diplomat in Russia, and he basically kind of uncovers um, a lot of what was happening with some of the oligarchs in Russia, and he ends up creating the Magnitsky Act, that ends up kind of like freezing Russian money in the United States over a friend of his that was killed in Russia. Really fascinating book. Not sure how that book hasn't been optioned yet into a movie.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love political books. I love political thrillers. There's not as many as I wish there was, but and I love I love a good romantic comedy. So all over the gamut on that one.
Is is Almost Famous the one where they were going west with Lewis and Clark, or is it the one where the lady was trying to be a superstar?
No, Almost Famous is the one which you have to watch. One of the best movies of all time. It's about it. It's really an autobiography of Cameron Crowe, who's the writer and director. He was a young Rolling Stone writer, and so in the fictionalized version in the movie, he covers this band called Stillwater. It's Kate Hudson's first big role. She played this groupie by the name of Penny Lane. Great movie.
Mhm.
It's a great movie.
Yeah, I definitely have not seen it then. I swear
Yeah.
there's like an Almost Famous or something like that where it was like came out in the 90s, early 2000s, where it's a bunch of people trying to be like Lewis and Clark, and they keep like fighting eagles and stuff. It's a comedy. It's not a rom
Okay.
com. Um, yeah,
Not sure about that one.
yeah. I don't know. I don't think I'm thinking of the right thing now. I'm gonna
Yeah.
have to Google it after this. If anyone knows what I'm talking about, please send it to me. It's like a Lewis and Clark thing. Yeah. Your recommendations are better than mine.
Okay.
I can't think of any rom coms that are coming out that are like jumping. My wife and I keep trying to find movies. That's the thing. Like
Yeah.
at a movie theater, there's not that much coming out anymore. There's like Puss in Boots or some like
Yeah.
uh, stuff like that. But like I remember when there used to be like 10 things a week, and you could just
I
like kind of like
know.
menu it. It's
I
kind
know.
of
I just
kind of
actually went
sad.
to the movies by myself the other day, in the middle of the day to watch The Fablemans, which is Steven Spielberg's new movie. Highly, highly recommended. I thought it was absolutely beautiful, and really deserves to be watched in a theater.
Just a quick question on everyone. Check these out. You have the Saturday
Yeah.
to see these things. Is there? So I know there's types of actors. So there's like method actors. There's not method actors. I guess the two types that I know. Um, are kid how how do you go about getting the best of the different types? Like if they're just like if you look at it from a high level, I'm sure there's like nuances to the different
Yeah.
like people and how they like to be spoken to. But like, have you the different types like method, not method? I'm sure there's more than that. Um, are there ways as a director, producer, writer to like talk to someone who I'm thinking like Daniel Day Lewis as like being like Abraham Lincoln, and he has everyone refer to him as the president. It's like, okay, it's Daniel Day Lewis, so you just do what he says.
Right.
But like, um, is there any like pointers for people who are going to make films, and there's different types of actors like that, and just on like a high level, how to like get the best out of the different ways that the actor tries to get the best out of the what's written on paper?
Yeah, I mean, listen, personally, I'm of the belief that 90% of your job is casting the right actor. I mean, if you cast the right actor, they're going to do most of the work, most of the heavy lifting themselves. You know, the good actors will do their homework. You know, they'll create, whether they're journals or diaries or just thoughts in their head of how that actor truly thinks, you know, in the most profound ways. I always think that you can tell if an actor is a really good actor, you know, when the camera isn't supposed to be on them and they're still thinking, like they're still present in the scene, and they, you know, they're still a real person with thoughts. It's not just like, let me deliver my lines. Okay, now it's your turn. Now it's my turn. It's table tennis, and, you know, and it kind of ends the minute my lines are over. So anyway, so yeah, it has to be instinctual to a certain point. I think that the most important thing is to be very careful in the advice that you're giving them. You know, try to imagine yourself in their shoes, and not be giving them opposing advice, you know, and not be giving them too much advice, you know, like it has to be things that are very specific. You know, I like to help them more in the sense of, let's work on what was happening right before the scene and what's going to happen right after the scene, because I feel like it gives them a sense of place, and it gives them a sense of, you know, where they really are in that moment in their lives, you know, versus, you know, the technical stuff. I mean, you kind of work out that morning, you know, you get to set, you work with the DP or, you know, or whoever else, and you kind of sit there, you block them, let the actors kind of find their flow, and then help block them. But when they're struggling or they're not finding the truth in that moment or the truth in that scene, I like to try to talk it out with them and try to figure out, you know, where was that person? What were they doing right before they walked in the room? It kind of sets them into the right mind frame. And usually with that, they can find their truth, you know, versus giving them very specific advice, like you should be smiling right now, or you should be frowning right now, you know, unless you know that for a certain moment that you're going to cut to somebody else and you need them doing a specific action. It's more about them discovering what their truth is.
Yeah. I was listening to an interview about October Sky. It's like a movie about rockets. And and it was Gyllenhaal who was saying that he was acting, but he was like yelling and stuff. He was yelling and stuff, but then the other actor, the older guy, I forget his name, he was saying, stop yelling and yell at me. Like, instead of just like doing the lines, like have the argument with me. And that, like, Gyllenhaal was basically just like saying the things on paper and trying to act them.
Exactly.
But not like speaking to the person, like the other actor. And then there's something about like over emoting. Apparently people who are like just coming out of colleges or whatever for acting, they over emote. I'm not entirely sure what that means. I think they just like smile more than they should. I
think it's also maybe if you've done a lot of theater, you know, I mean, film is a very small medium in the sense that it's going to catch every single thing you're going to do. Whereas, you know, when you're in the theater, you really do need to over everything. And I think that's a little switch that it takes actors a little bit.
Is there, so I thought Reefa was very well shot. Is there, when you look at other filmmakers like Scorsese or Spielberg, in your eyes, as like, it's kind of like an artist knows like shades of a color. Like my wife and I will be looking at colors and she's like, that's turquoise. And I'm like, that's teal to me. But so like, you can see the gradations of color. What do you feel is like, are you able to see the differences in other filmmakers in terms of how they do stuff and then incorporate it in your stuff? I mean, it's kind of an obvious question, but at the same time, I'm kind of curious, like what is the difference between like an average director and someone like yourself or Scorsese or Spielberg? Because they're all telling stories and they're using like film to do it. And from my eyes, it all looks like I can tell when like something's black or white or whatever, but sometimes I'm just like, this is teal. And some people are like, and it's like seafoam.
No, I totally understand what you're saying. I mean, I think that there's a huge difference in the way that things are shot and the way that certain directors use the camera to tell their stories, you know, and other directors just have the camera there, you know, as a tool. I mean, Scorsese and Spielberg, you're talking about two of the masters in the way that they use their cameras. I mean, their cameras are part of the dance. Whereas, you know, in other cases, it kind of is just there as a mechanism to, you know, relay the story from like a live action into, you know, the film molecules or whatever. with Reefa in particular, we really focused a lot on the color and the color palette of the film. He liked to paint with the color gold. And, I thought that gold was also like a very good, just, metaphor for everything in his life. He was the golden child. He was, the golden friend. I mean, whatever, and so we debated a lot what camera we were going to use. We debated a lot whether we should shoot on film, or on, shoot it digitally. We ultimately decided digitally. I would have loved to shoot on film. My first film we shot on 35 millimeter, but this one, in the interest of time, I mean, we really had to run and gun a lot. So in the interest of time, we decided to shoot it digitally, but we did pick a camera that we thought would absorb, the colors that we were trying to leak into it through different, different filters, different emulsions. And so that was very important to us. But yeah, I mean, I think that for me, I'm hyper aware of where the camera is at all times in films when I'm watching them, and I realize it when I'll say to my family, we're watching a movie, and I'll say, God, that was such a beautiful shot. And I realize that they just took it for granted, they took it for granted as part of the story, when I realized that was, that was a dance. I mean, that was someone trying to tell the story in a very specific way, using the camera as a way to tell that.
Is there a qualitative difference that you can observe between film and digital? But does it actually look different?
I do. I think there is. I mean, there was something in the graininess of like a film that's shot on film, that it feels very artistic to me. The new digital cameras are beautiful, and some of them can get close, but then there's other cameras or other ways of shooting that almost seem too hyper realistic, that it almost feels like you're watching a soap opera. Yeah.
And then how do people, like, if someone has a filmmaker, other than just like having a Google alert for their names, what's a good way to stay up to date with the stuff that you're working on? Like, I imagine IMDB is like the LinkedIn for art people, but I also have never used it, so I don't know. Is that so?
It is. It's kind of the mecca for any information, especially IMDb Pro when you get a little more specific into production companies, agents, things like that.
Yeah, I used to make this joke that are you familiar with DB Cooper? I made the joke that he survived and he made a social network to like hide his identity, but he wanted to be cheeky about it, so he made IMDb.
Oh, that's really funny.
Yeah. I said it to a bunch of scientists the first time I said it, and they looked at me and was like, "What? Why would he?" They looked at it a little too literally. But so the best way to follow along with your developments is to get on just like keep an eye on IMDb. You don't have like a newsletter.
Instagram, I feel is pretty good these days. Especially if you follow someone's personal Instagram, you kind of know what they're doing. But yeah, either Instagram or IMDb, both good options. I look, IMDb, for example, like these 3 projects that I'm working on right now, I haven't even put them on IMDb yet, just because they're all still relatively in development. So I don't know, maybe I'm probably the worst person to ask these questions to, because I'm so bad about this stuff. But yeah.
I recently got an Instagram, and I post like nothing. I just like to connect and see what everyone else is doing. Or in the last filmmaker who was on, suggested starting one. It's like, okay, I'll do it, but I don't understand the medium. And there's like, it's nice to follow people. Like, it's basically like my timeline is like people like you, and then food, because I look for food ideas.
Don't worry,
I feel like I'm not doing it right.
Yeah.
As a filmmaker, would you ever do like a newsletter or something like that, where you can keep people like, hey, I'm doing this type of stuff? Because I feel like people would, like, if you like told these types of stories in like a little like 4-point newsletter every now and again, like I think it'd be pretty cool.
Good, but again, I'm probably the worst when it comes to that stuff. I mean, any kind of self-promotion or anything, I'm busy. I don't know. I mean to do it, and then I just forget to.
That's fair. If it doesn't feel right, then don't. That's when people do newsletters, I just say like, find a way to make it fun. If it can't be fun, then don't do it. Totally. You have so many other things to do on your time.
Exactly.
Is there a quote or a movie you would leave us with to think about?
Shit, these like questions on the spot. A quote or a movie to think about. I'm sure there are, and I probably have about 1,000 of them, but I can't really remember.
No worries.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Look, I hope the audience keeps watching movies. I mean that's what I would say. TV is incredible now, and there's so much talent in television. Um, but there's something about being transported to a story that has a beginning, middle, and end, within a limited amount of time. And I hope that I see it with my kids right now. My kids don't watch as much movies as they watch TV shows, and
Yeah.
there's something to their attention to just being under 60 minutes that they can handle, and that movies seem daunting to them. And I hope that changes, because I think it's still such an incredibly beautiful art form that I hope our attention spans don't get more limited in space, where our movies have to be limited to TikToks.
Thank you for joining us today with the Learn with Lowell show. Check us out at learnwithlowell.com. Anywhere podcasts can be found, subscribe. Tell me what you thought of this episode. Check us out on YouTube in particular. It's a new thing I'm doing. Timestamps and links are in the show notes. Thank you for coming, and I hope every one of you found something today that you're curious about to learn more about, and you'll go out and be curious and learn something new. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.